They laughed when he set up his spotter's scope with the same slow ritual he'd practiced for 30 years. The desert sun glared down on the platoon as boots ground into pale sand, rifles slung low, the heat pressing against every helmet. To the younger soldiers, the man crouched on the ridge was a relic, a stubborn leftover from another war. To them, he was just Grandpa, gray at the temples, deep creases in his face, too steady, too slow. Sergeant Daniel Harlan ignored the laughter. He pulled the M2010 ESR from its case like a craftsman unwrapping an old tool. The barrel gleamed faintly, already oiled. He unfolded the bipod, pressed the stock into his shoulder, and breathed out once, evenly. His fingers moved with deliberate calm, sliding a wind meter free, watching the tiny propellers spin. He clicked his scope adjustments with the precision of a clockmaker winding time forward. On the ground below, Littermark Falcon Reyes led the column through the basin. He had the posture of a man in command, sharp movements and clipped words. To him, the old sniper was a burden carried by command orders, not by choice. Falcon had argued in briefing why a 54-year-old belonged in combat, but the orders had been clear. Harlan, still qualified, still effective. Falcon had shrugged, but now his eyes flicked upward with doubt as the platoon spread out across the sand. CPL, Jenna, Echo. Park jogged near Falcon, radio strapped tight to her pack, antenna cutting against the blue sky. Her voice carried fast when called, a mix of nerves and training. Behind her, the kid, Pivot Kyle Rook Henderson, stumbled with his rifle too high, his breathing loud. He was barely out of training, face red with heat and effort. He glanced up the ridge where Grandpa was setting his glass and whispered, "He really going to see anything from up there?" Ortiz, the staff sergeant, muttered back, "He'll see more than you ever will, kid. Keep moving." Harlan steadied his breathing. 600 meters stretched between him and the patrol route below. He had chosen his perch for angles and concealment, eyes tracing the far ridges where heat shimmered like ghosts rising from stone. He counted shadows where rocks didn't match the sun. He measured silence where birds should have been. Rook squinted into the distance. "Sir, I think I saw—" He pointed toward a ridge, movement no bigger than a flicker in the haze. Falcon brushed it off. "Mirage. Keep your eyes forward, Henderson. Don't spook the line." Rook lowered his rifle, embarrassed, his face flushed deeper than the sun could make it. Harlan didn't turn, but he caught the faint ripple Rook had noticed. He adjusted his dial a single click, eyes never leaving the horizon. Time slowed. The patrol pressed forward into the wide-open choke where the basin narrowed between ridges. Boots dragged, sweat poured. Falcon pushed them hard, confident in drone overwatch. Harlan's ears caught every shift in the wind. His cheek rested against cool metal, his eye glued to glass. The radio crackled sharp in Echo's ear. "Falcon, actual. This is Echo. Eyes in the sky paint. 3, correction, 5 signatures. North Ridge, over." Falcon froze. Ortiz raised his hand, signaling the column to halt. The air shifted. Soldiers dropped into crouches. Rook's mouth went dry. Harlan adjusted his focus, breath shallow. On his scope, faint shapes bled against the stone, a cluster of bodies hidden where shadow kissed the ridge. Falcon pressed the handset to his chin. "Say again, Echo. Confirm 5 signatures." "Echo confirms, sir. Drone feed shows infrared movement, coordinates marked." The desert went silent, heavier than before. Sweat ticked down helmets, rifles lifted into tighter grips. Falcon's jaw tensed. He looked up toward Grandpa's ridge, just a gray silhouette against blazing light. The men whispered. Rook mouthed, "What now?" Ortiz's eyes narrowed, scanning the ridge. Echo pressed her headset tighter, straining against static. Falcon weighed options, his hands twitching on the map board. Grandpa Harlan did not move quickly. He closed his wind meter, slid it back into his pouch, and settled against the rifle. His fingers curled on the bolt handle. Steady. Patient. To the soldiers below, he was just a shadow, too slow for their pace, too old for their war. But in the glass pressed to his eye, the world came sharp, 5 blurred figures shifting where no shadows belonged. He whispered to himself, words carried only on the wind. "They're waiting." And down in the basin, unaware of how close the trap was tightening, Falcon gave the order to move forward. The ridge had teeth, and soon the desert would bite. The first rocket hit like thunder, and suddenly the desert walls spat fire. Sand erupted in the air, showering the column with burning fragments. The narrow choke point that had looked so harmless turned into a killing ground. Shouts rose, weapons snapped up, and the air filled with the high, tearing sound of automatic fire. Grandpa Harlan had warned them. He had called for caution, told them to slow their pace, to watch the ridges. But Falcon had pressed forward, eager to clear the basin before the sun dropped behind the hills. Now the lieutenant's confidence cracked under the roar of battle. RPG smoke hung thick, drifting between rocks where muzzle flashes flared. The platoon scattered, diving for scraps of cover. Ortiz barked orders, dragging Henderson down behind a jagged boulder. Rook's face was pale, his rifle trembling as he fired wild bursts into the haze. Echo pressed herself into the dirt, radio clutched tight, her voice sharp and urgent. "Falcon, actual, this is Echo. We are taking heavy fire North Ridge, multiple contacts, over." Return fire hammered against stone, but the ambushes were dug in high, invisible except for flickers of muzzle flame. Then a sharper crack split the chaos. A forward scout spun backward, chest hit clean by a single round. The platoon froze. Not random fire, a sniper. Panic rippled through the line. "Sniper! Sniper!" Rook's voice cracked. Another bullet struck sparks off a helmet, forcing the men lower. Falcon's jaw tightened as he pressed to cover, searching for any angle, any response. High above, Grandpa lay prone on his perch, 600 meters behind. He exhaled slowly, lowering his cheek to the rifle stock. His scope swept across rock and dust until he caught it, the faintest glint, like a mirror's edge catching sun. His mind measured distance. His fingers turned the dials without hesitation. "Sniper nest," he muttered, voice too low for anyone but himself. The radio popped in his ear. Echo to Falcon. Drone feed shows. Nest, grid marked, distance 1450 meters. Falcon's reply came quick, almost disbelieving. "That's outside range. We'll never hit it." Harlan didn't answer. His hands moved steady, sliding around into the chamber, pulling the bolt with a soft click. His brain ran numbers. 1,550 meters. Crosswind gusting 12 miles an hour from the west. Uphill angle, about 5 degrees. His lips whispered the correction. "Hold 2 mils left, half mil high." Down below, Falcon gripped the radio, his voice strained. "Say again. That's too far." Harlan's voice cut through, calm, unshaken. "Trust me." Another RPG screamed into the canyon wall, shattering stone into shards. Men huddled low, grit biting into their faces. Rook clutched his rifle uselessly, eyes darting toward the ridge where Grandpa lay. Ortiz slammed a fresh mag into his weapon and shouted over the noise. "Falcon! He's the only shot we've got!" Falcon's chest rose and fell. He glanced at Echo, who was staring at her display, the drone feed showing a glowing shape crouched on the distant ridge. "It's him, sir. Clear as day. He has the angle." Falcon's hesitation lasted one breath longer. Then he slammed the transmit. "Grandpa, you're green. Take it." Harlan's world shrank to the scope. Crosshairs floated on heat shimmer, sliding over rock. The sniper's head was a blur of helmet and shadow. The wind tugged, invisible but real, and he adjusted once more. He slowed his breathing. Inhale. Hold. Exhale halfway. Heartbeat steady. The chaos of the battle faded behind him. There was only the glass, the distance, and the target. The sniper shifted, adjusting position for another shot. That small movement sealed it. Harlan's finger curled against the trigger, smooth as water over stone. He pressed. The rifle barked. A single round streaked across canyon and wind, carrying his years of discipline with it. Down below, no one could see if it hit. Not yet. Soldiers cowered against the firestorm, waiting. Falcon stared at the ridge with eyes wide, Echo clutching her headset like the feed might reveal salvation. Rook whispered to himself, praying the old man wasn't just a ghost in the sand. On the drone's screen, the feed flickered as the round reached its mark. And in that frozen moment, every man and woman held their breath, waiting to see if the shot would decide their fate. On the drone's silent eye, the impossible looked effortless. The canyon was still ringing from gunfire, echoes rolling off stone like ghosts refusing to leave. Smoke clung to the ridgeline where the ambushers had fired, a haze of dust and cordite curling above the broken rock. The platoon huddled in cover, hearts still pounding, ears still straining for the next shot. Somewhere beyond the roar of their own breathing, the single sharp crack of Harlan's rifle faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. Even the desert wind seemed to pause as if waiting for confirmation. Then the radio crackled, harsh and clear. Falcon actual. This is Echo. Hostile sniper down. Repeat, down. Impact registered at grid 15N, 1470 meters. The words hit harder than the gunfire had. Heads turned. Eyes found the old man lying prone on his perch 600 meters back, rifle still angled toward the ridge. The brass casing rolled beside him, warm in the dust, catching the light like a medal dropped from heaven. The drone feed replayed on their tablets, black and white thermal blur showing the sniper's body jerking back, collapsing against the rocks. One perfect line traced across the digital grid, a single round bending distance and wind to find its mark. The young soldiers stared at the image, wide-eyed. On the screen, it had looked simple. In reality, it had been impossible. Rook whispered almost to himself, That was him. Grandpa did that." No one mocked the name this time. Falcon's jaw tightened as he pressed against the canyon wall. He had doubted the old rifleman, questioned his place on this mission, wondered why command had saddled them with a relic. But relics didn't save platoons with a single bullet. Relics didn't make shots that history books struggled to believe. Falcon exhaled hard, the weight of pride and regret mingling in the same breath. "All units," he said over the comms, voice steadier now. "Regroup. Push forward. Clean them out." The platoon surged with renewed purpose. The ambushers, robbed of their overwatch and shaken by the sudden reversal, scattered in confusion. The Americans pressed them, fire and discipline cutting through the canyon until silence fell at last. When the dust cleared, the survivors gathered near the mouth of the pass. Helmets lifted, eyes scanned the ridges, every man and woman alive because of a single rifleman who had never stopped believing in his craft. And there, still on his perch, Harlan worked with quiet hands. He pulled the bolt back, ejected the last round's brass with a slow metallic clink, and set about cleaning the chamber. Not a word, not a boast. Just the ritual of a man who knew tomorrow would demand the same patience, the same precision. Rook approached first, climbing the slope awkwardly, rifle slung low. He paused a few meters behind the old sniper, unsure how to speak. At last he said, I saw the feed. Sir, that shot." Harlan didn't look up. He ran an oiled cloth along the bolt, steady as a surgeon. "Wind was steady. Ridge gave me a backstop. Nothing special." "Nothing special." Rook's voice cracked with disbelief. 1,470 meters, across a canyon, through crosswind. That was... Finally, Harlan turned his weathered face toward the boy. His eyes were calm, the same unshaken gray they had been when laughter had rolled through the platoon at his expense. "You keep calling it impossible," he said, "and one day you'll start believing it. Best not to think that way." Rook swallowed, nodding, though he knew he'd replay those words for years. Down below, Falcon climbed toward them. He carried his helmet in one hand, sweat streaking the dirt across his brow. For a long moment he just stood there, studying the rifleman who had carried them through hell. At last, he said quietly, "You saved them, Harlan. You saved all of us." The old man gave a small shrug, already fitting his scope cover back in place. "Just did my job, Captain." Falcon looked as though he might argue, but the words faltered. Respect settled in their place. He extended his hand. Harlan paused only a second before taking it, a firm grip bridging decades of soldiering between them. Word spread faster than the wind. By the time the sun slanted low and the canyon shadows stretched long, every soldier in the platoon had seen the drone feed twice over. They watched the replay in silence, the crack of the shot echoing through the barren air, the target's fall marked forever by the HUD's blinking grid. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others smiled in awe. None would forget it. As twilight deepened, the platoon prepared to move again. Packs were adjusted, rifles checked, silence filling the gaps where doubt had once lived. And high on his perch, Harlan lingered a moment longer. He looked out across the canyon he had conquered with nothing but patience, steel, and faith in his craft. The desert wind brushed his face, carrying the faint smell of smoke, the memory of laughter, the ghost of doubt now gone. He slung the rifle over his shoulder, movement slow, deliberate, timeless. Then he followed the others down, steps steady as if the years weighed nothing at all. Tomorrow they would walk into another valley, another uncertainty. But tonight there was only one truth left standing. They called him Grandpa, until the feed showed the shot that saved them all. And in the quiet after victory, the old rifleman was already preparing for the next shot,